Hello and welcome. Today we're going to wrap up this class discussing chapters 11 through 14. Again, the point of this class has been to think about what's it going to take to be successful. And in order to be successful, we not only have to think about our educational skills, but we also have to think about social psychological factors such as motivation, emotion, how you're thinking, what's going on in your life, how do you manage the work-life balance. And so again, getting through school, it's not easy, and it's generally an unpaid job. It's something that you're trying to do for yourself. And so we're always asking, what are we doing here and why are we here? And again, it helps to be able to answer that question because that will give us purpose, reason, all of these things that we might need. And again, when I reflect back on my own school, what did it take? At first, I don't think I was very ready. And then it took me 1 or 2 years to really settle into the mindset like, okay, I want this, I'm ready. And I remember that first semester when I got the first set of grades in, and I was like, okay, I'm one step closer to graduating. I've got something in the books. That was an incredible feeling. And again, I'll reward myself with golf, with good food, or whatever it might be, just to celebrate your accomplishments. But again, that's kind of the goal of this class. Today, we're going to be focusing on a couple other concepts like civility, and so today we're going to be looking at civility, treating yourself with respect, financial literacy, and then really examining your major and are you in the place that you want to be, okay? And again, these have been challenging questions because hopefully that you've had a chance to reflect and ask yourself, okay, where am I at with mathematics? Where am I at with reading and writing? How am I doing on the discussion boards? Do I understand the technology? Am I good with working on quizzes? How do I do an online class versus a face-to-face class? So you're going to have all kinds of things that are going to come up. Then we've talked about learning styles, like what's the best way for you to approach learning? Again, is it an online environment? Is it a face-to-face lecture environment? What's most convenient for you? Are you somebody that needs to watch the lectures? Are you somebody that really needs to focus more on the book? How are you doing with your note taking? Are you good at doing outlines? And so again, there's a lot of skills that we need to think about when we're going into school. And again, any skills that you might be lacking in, just ask for help. Come seek it out. Let's learn the skills to get us up to par to where we need to be successful. Don't be shy. Don't be embarrassed. Don't be scared. Talk to your professors. Talk to your advisors. That's the best way to succeed in college. Just be open and honest and comfortable with who you are and what's going on in your life, okay? So the purpose of this chapter with civility, though, is to, and again, when we think about civility, that's just our conforming to the social norms of the professional environment that we're in. And so each professional environment has its own set of social norms, its own culture. And so again, right now, you guys are being socialized into the healthcare culture, including the vocabulary, the language, what's appropriate, how do you dress, how do you walk, talk, how do you write, how do you fill out forms, whatever it might be. You guys are now conforming to that way of life. I'm a professor. I've conformed to this way of life. The how to get everything done from A to Z, how to interact with other peers, how to, whatever it is you have to do to be a professor and the culture that comes with that, right? I used to be a hotel manager, for example, and we had all kinds of words like RevPAR. And I've talked about this in previous lectures that depending upon the culture you identify dictates the language and things that that you end up incorporating into your own mindset and then utilizing in your own social behaviors, for example. But again, what is it going to take to get along in this kind of environment? That's the question you should be asking with this chapter. So again, identify the stage of group development that you found most difficult and practice a strategy to cope with that challenge. So how do you conform to the groups? What's been difficult for you? Have you ever had to have small groups and then try to work as a small team? I have students all the time that struggle with that. They hate anything to do with group work. But at the same time, interpersonal skills is something that the state of Ohio evaluates, and it's required for accreditation in colleges. So it's important to put students in positions, for example, where they have to work together, but again, that can create all kinds of challenges because you have a whole mesh of personalities and priorities and ideas, and you're all trying to come together to achieve some form of an outcome. And how successful are you at doing that? So again, the interpersonal skills are important. That's getting along with others, being able to work together, being able to focus, come up with an action plan to achieve your goals as a team. And again, it's very hard in the medical community to do anything on your own. You have to have a team in all areas. So again, learning to work with them. Skills that help with that are things like emotional intelligence. As we develop across our lifespan, hopefully the part of our brain that's involved with emotional intelligence grows as our experiences grow and our wisdom because of our experiences grow, that we get better at working with our feelings and then how to manage our feelings in social situations and as individuals in our own lives. Okay. Effective communication, again, how to work with others in positive ways, and then active listening. How do you listen and then prompt and then offer ideas and listen and prompt, and that, how to sustain a good communication. Explain at least two consideration for forming your own group. I am obsessively trying to create committees and get people together to solve problems. My most recent one was to get a student food pantry going and to get a team involved in that because it required a team, right? But then I had to work with like the entire bureaucracy to get it done, from the provost to student services to faculty senate. And again, it was a bit of a process and it required a lot of emails and a lot of people getting involved. But eventually, we established a team, we established a hierarchy of organization. Everybody got divvied out tasks and we began to work on our goals. But again, it also requires things like trust. Not that I'm saying you need to go like trust everyone, yada, 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 but you have to hope and pray that everyone is trained and is doing their job. Because again, I can't do the food pantry on my own. I'm not there every day. I need other people that are there other days to be knocking out that job for me. So I have to have faith in them that they'll be able to handle their part of the job, for example. Or if you're working as a student, they're part of the project. Okay? Size is always important. Like a group of 3 is nice. Sometimes you get too many, it gets too chaotic. So I usually suggest, if you're working in like study groups, things along those lines, 3, 4, 5 is probably about a good number for that. You need to avoid groupthink, which is again, everyone kind of being scared to speak up. Don't hesitate to speak up in a civil kind of way. Speak your mind. If you have good ideas or ways to run this group or ways to run this system, don't hesitate. Okay? Boundaries, establishing boundaries for the group for communication and who's going to do what and what are going to be the deadlines and how are we going to hold each other accountable, things like that. And then again, working with different types of people that have different ways of doing things can always be complicated. So it's good to get some kind of a standardized, formalized approach that everyone can work together on their parts of the project. Identify at least one healthy way to minimize how negative people affect you. We all internalize how we think other people feel about us, for example. The idea of the looking glass self, right? So, how do you deal with that? One, how do you work with negative people in general? Is there a way to create the situation and make it more positive, more manageable? How do you interact with people like that in general? And I mean, I'm not going to sit back and pretend to teach you how to do all that, but I was a GM for a long time. Usually I humble myself day one. I get to the floor, I just humble myself. I ask, what can I do to improve the situation anyway? To, have a calming effect on someone, for example. um, but again, how does it get into your head? Do you allow those people into your life? That's your own kind of thing. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you about who you should have in your life, but sometimes you have to work in group situations in the school and you can have some bad attitudes. How do you work with bad attitudes? And I mean, that's something that takes time to develop. And how do you also not have a bad attitude yourself? Like, what happens when a student is not doing their part of the project? Do you get all negative and have a bad attitude about it? Or is there a different approach? Maybe we can email a professor and be like, hey, we're struggling a little bit with how to cope with this situation because this person isn't pulling their weight, for example. So there's a lot of different approaches. Just be creative. What are 3 active listening techniques you can use to improve your communication? Just, when I'm ever in conversations, and what the book recommends is, 1, just listen and focus on what they're saying. And then 2, ask probing questions. Okay. And then 3, get to know them a little bit. I was listening to NPR the other day about how to really engage in active listening and how to ask questions. And they were making good suggestions about what people are interested in and how to ask them questions and get them talking and things along those lines. So it's good to have some probing questions. And then again, thinking about conflict management strategies. What are you going to do when the situations arise? How are you going to engage in conflict resolution? What are your skills going to be? Again, you're going to have these problems, whether it's in school or whether it's in your careers, when you come across things that are very difficult. And so, again, like me as a professor, for example, I'm constantly getting emails from all kinds of directions about all kinds of things that could be perceived as, aggressive or even hostile from people. It's just the way of the game. And so what you do is again, I have just simply humbled myself, and you have to act professional and then definitely document everything. That's the key to everything. And so if you're in a student position and it's something you have to go to the bureaucracy or your professor over, sometimes that works. But if it's not something you want to go to the bureaucracy over, what are you going to do in your group to calm everybody down? Do we all need to take 10 seconds? Do we need to table this conversation for a few minutes? How about everybody proposes their idea and we take a vote? So again, just get creative, okay? Um, all right. So treating yourself with respect. Again, we've talked about this the entire time when it comes to the cycle of success and the cycle of failure, and we applied it to things like test anxiety. But again, how do you feel about yourself? How do you feel about your abilities? Are you confident? Have you studied? Have you prepared? Have you taken care of yourself? Because if you do all of these things, then that tends to lead to success in tests and exams, okay? And so then the more you feed that, you end up with more and more positive results. But throughout this class, I've said just, for memory and to be successful, there's some things we need to talk about, like eating well. Is diet a huge factor? Guys, look at some of the research with diet and brain functioning. And again, when it comes to intelligence, for example, the number one thing associated with intelligence is, did you eat today? What's your nutrition level? And that's really sad when you start to apply that to like kids in poverty, for example. But there are college students that may be struggling with that. I mean, not even maybe. There are college students that are struggling with food insecurity. So again, hence my obsession with trying to start the food pantry. Like, I just want to help out and do whatever we can. And sleeping. Okay, again, we all like to disregard sleep because we want to get in those last couple episodes on Netflix. But for your brain to store information, that rest and stuff is just incredibly important. So these are all things your book talks about: eating well, thinking about sleeping enough, having a good diet, exercise, taking care of your body, not smoking. How are you coping with relationships in your life? Is that distracting you from your school? Are there any approaches that you need to take to work on that? Where is the state of your mental and physical health? Because again, if we can reflect and ask ourselves where we're at and then take some steps to improve anything that might be lacking, is that going to yield more college success and more life success and whatever else kind of success that we're looking for? Of course. So again, what is your overall well-being? What is your overall self-esteem? How are you feeling? And if it's not great, what can we do to help with that? Maybe you just need to have a little bit of fun. Maybe it's been a while since you just been out and laughed a little bit. And sometimes you get so intense and stressed and caught up in the moment when you're in school and you're so busy and bouncing around that you hardly even have a second to even think about it. And then when you do think about it, you're like, I am so tired. And, you know, that's just the way of it a little bit, right? And so how do we improve that situation? How do we have that work life school balance? How do we manage it all, stay positive, stay happy, try to stay sane, try to keep it together even though we just want to fall apart at times, because we do. We're human. We're not machines. We have feelings. So the book talks about committing to 2 actions that will keep you healthy and safe in your relationships and in your life. I know for me, it was eating oatmeal and banana instead of fried food, switching to skim milk, running a mile a day, rock climbing. I turned 40, cholesterol levels were starting to get high. I had to make some changes. And then, with school and stuff, of course, you're just constantly stressed out. And so maybe there's times where you just need some, little 5 minutes of therapy or some EMDR or meditation or whatever it might be. Breathing exercises, breathe in for 5 seconds, count to 10, breathe out for 5 seconds, whatever it might be for you. These are just things to talk about. And then your book talks about the 6 dimensions of wellness. Again, maintaining that good experiences in the social context and in your interactions with others. Having an occupation that covers your finances and is something that you can buy into and enjoy doing. Considering the spiritual side of it all, you never know. The physical side, taking care of your body, and then taking care of your mind. So, again, eat, sleep, good interactions with friends, reward yourself once in a while, try to hold it together, hug once in a while. Sometimes you just need a hug, whatever it takes to help you get through this. Just, be honest with that, be open with that, and seek those things out because that'll help you in the end. I'm not going to claim to be like some guru with finances. But again, just thinking about what it's like being a college student and the socioeconomic status of most college students. Socioeconomic status is a measure of your educational attainment, plus your job prestige, plus your wealth, plus other forms of social and cultural capital, okay? Most college students haven't developed forms of capital yet. They're in college to get that job, to go out and get that wealth so they can have that capital, right? And so again, hence my obsession with the food pantry. What happens when your car breaks down? You know how many students are just negatively affected because their car broke down and now they can't drive to school anymore and maybe they have to drop out for a semester or two until they can get a car, for example? And so again, it's a good idea to think about things like developing a budget to help you manage your money and minimize your debt. Because you know how it is when you're in college. There's credit cards out there. You are just smacked in the face with potential for student loans and then how much you're going to have to pay back in the end. So we need to be thinking about this. We need to be thinking about our food, shelter, water, phones, computers, bills. I mean, it just adds up to so many thousands of dollars every month. So I can see where it's incredibly stressful trying to do all of the above. Survive, take care of your kids, work, go to school, pay for school, and then try to save some money, which I know is that difficult for you. I mean, who is difficult for all of us. I mean, the average American only makes $65,000 a year, and that's pretty much about what it costs to pay all the bills and things for the average family in America. So again, establish a goal to identify and eliminate unnecessary spending. These are all just the book suggestions. Build awareness of spending, borrowing, earning, and savings patterns. Recommend strategies for using credit and other borrowing. Because again, you got credit cards, you got student loans. There's all kinds of things that you need to be thinking about. For me to survive all the way through school raising kids, I always tended to have 2, 3 jobs in different states and all over the place wherever I was. Many a times of scrounging up baked beans or scrounging up change to get some baked beans and macaroni and cheese for my kid, when he was super young. I have, of course, so many of those memories. My transmission breaking down on the Kentucky-Tennessee border and wondering how I was going to survive and still drive to school and commute back and forth from Ohio to Tennessee. But again, we keep trugging away. We're human, and we're going to have to deal with conflict, whether it's finances or with other people or in our relationships. When we're trying to work our way up in life, it's not always easy, you know. So again, there's a lot of struggle to be considered when you're in school. And again, that's why allow the support services to help you. Reach out, be open about it. What can we do to make it better for you to survive? And I know you guys are all in that situation. It's just the way it is when you're in college, scrounging up some change to get a double stack at Wendy's, or a couple dollars in your gas tank to make it to class or to work that day. And hopefully you survive until Friday. But the goal is, right, to get the degree because those who get the degree tend to make twice as much as those who don't get the degree. And then if you get even higher levels of degree, you start to double that. The average American with a bachelor's degree makes the average income in America 65,000. The average high school diploma is 33,000. Average MBA or master's degree, you're looking at 75,000 and up. Same thing with the PhD. MBAs and stuff tend to make more money than like a PhD because one's academic and one's business, for example. And so different arenas in the social context are associated with differential income. But again, that's a good conversation for our sociology class. For you guys, again, it's just being aware of what do you need to survive and get through this. Again, just focus on that. That's why the idea of a budget is this. Like, I need $1,600, $2,000 a month income coming in. And then do I have any extra money for what's coming in? And then the rest of it comes later. Definitely learn about stocks and bonds and mutual funds and saving money and CDs and all of that. Trust funds for the kids, dynasty trust funds when you get super rich after making your 80 grand a year, or more as a nurse. So again, just things to think about. But again, I'm not going to obviously be an economics professor or a finance professor. That's my best friend, George, who's across the hall from me in my office. He's the economics guru. I go to him for all of these things. And then again, the book wraps up with this idea of exploration of majors and careers. And again, asking that self, are you where you want to be? And I like to think about it in terms of alienation. Are you connected to your job? Do you feel creative where you're at? Is this what you want? And then the other side of it is finances. Can you do this and survive? Because again, there's some majors that pay more than other majors, for example. And, depending upon your level of education, it dictates how much access you have to certain jobs, or depending upon your experience and skill level, determines your access to certain jobs. So you always need to be considering, is this feasible? Is this what I want? Is this feasible? And can I survive and achieve all of my life goals by choosing this as a career, which is supposed to be the means by which that I get everything I want, right? So again, the book says identify personal interests and how they relate to coursework, majors, and potential careers. I love philosophy. That's why I'm a psychology and sociology professor. It's the philosophy of the body and then the mind and the social context. And then I love the science of it all, the quantitative, the qualitative research, trying to discover, how phenomena work, for example. I'm obsessed with it. I love theory. And so again, that's what I do for a life. That's what I do for my job. But before this, I loved hospitality. I loved the environment of restaurants, hotels, and banquet centers. I started out as a server, a cook, a sous chef, front of the house manager. Then I became an executive chef, then a general manager of smaller places. And then I started working my way up to nicer and nicer places, got into the casinos, was doing great. But in the end, I always wanted to be a professor. But in order to be a professor, I mean, it was a lot less money than I was making out there in the business world. So again, I had to get to that point where I could really afford to be a professor. So for me, it was always a bit of a process getting here. Um, but I was still going to school and getting this all done while I was doing my GM job. Like I would have my full-time GM job and I would just teach for fun. That's how I started out as a professor. I didn't need the money. I just did it because I loved it. It was like going out golfing. I'd go teach some classes, and then I got to the point where I was like, maybe I can do this, maybe it's feasible. But again, it's that balance. How do you find that balance? Is this right for you? What major are you choosing? Is this what you want? Are you passionate about you? It's your decision. Now, again, I brought up earlier, but we're often socialized to think this is what you're supposed to do with your life. But again, for you, what do you think you should do for your life? Remove all of the other obstacles and ask yourself, is this right for you? Is this what you want? What do you want to do? And then once you know what's up, seek out your advisors constantly during the semester so you're always updated, you're making sure you're signing up for right classes, you have a great plan for graduation. Talk to your professors, constantly email them, show them your papers ahead of time, ask questions, spend all the time you need in the skill labs, whatever it might be. Look through the college catalog with your advisor so you're making sure you're actually choosing the classes you want to take. I mean, there's a lot of classes you have to take, but then you also have these options of classes that you might want to take. So consider those to make your college experience even more bright and awesome. Conduct research to determine skills, experience, and education needed for your career area. What is it you need to do to get into your career? How do you get that job? What vocabulary do you need for the resume? What skills and jobs and titles do you need on your resume to be able to get those jobs, and how do you get those? Like my early resumes was cooking and serving jobs. So by the time I was done, it was like 3 or 4 GM jobs. You know what I mean? And my resume was constantly evolving as I was working my way up. Same thing as a professor. I started out with one job, then I ended up with 6 or 7. Then I got a full-time job, then, and so my curriculum vitae is constantly being updated. Um, Explain 2 positive and 2 negative consequences of changing a college major. There's always going to be those moments for y'all. Sometimes you might think you want something so much, and then you get there and you're like, not at all what I expected, not at all what I want. And there's other people who have no idea what they want. They're just floating through until they figure out what it is what they want. So they just stick with that general transfer, kind of college course selection so that all their classes will transfer and then they can figure it out later. But again, depending upon where you're at, you might find it's no longer feasible or it's not what you want. That's totally fine. Most of your classes transfer over. Like my master's is in sociology, but my PhD is in psychology, right? I mean, it's a complete shift, but not really because I have a bachelor's degree in both psychology and sociology. But generally, you don't like get your master's in one thing and then skip over and get your PhD in another. Usually, it's a continuous cycle, but I love psychology. I miss it. It's this awesome, super in-depth thing, and I've spent years doing sociology and teaching sociology, and I was ready to really delve into the psychology side a lot more deep. And I wanted to really get at some biological things like are there differences between people based upon these socially constructed racial categories? Or are there differences between men and women biologically that create different ways of thinking and behaving in the social context, that I needed a little bit more strategic analysis that kind of extends beyond sociology into psychology and biology for that overall biopsychosocial perspective, which is my theoretical standpoint, if I had one, is definitely a historical biopsychosocial philosophical approach to studying people and how society functions. Okay, little offside, that's me. For y'all, what's it gonna be? What do you love? Are you where you're at? Because if you're where you're at, you're good. But if you find yourself that you're not, don't stress it. Think about it. Reflect about it. Life's gonna change. There's gonna be curveballs. That's just the way it goes. You might have some changes in your personal life that makes it so you want to change in your career. Like as a restaurant manager or whatever, GM, I never saw my kids. I mean, maybe on a Monday, but as a professor, I see my kids so much. So again, little less money, more time with the kids. So there's always that balance in how it functions. And then again, gather information to help you build an effective resume and portfolio. So constantly be building your resume. Start one now. It might look completely empty, but start adding the skills that you have to that resume. Gathering up recommendation letters. When you find a professor that you really get close to, ask them for a recommendation letter so you can have that to send out whenever you need to get your jobs or to apply for your next school or whatever it might be. Think about the products that you're going to need to add to your resume. What are you going to be able to bring to the table? What skills do you have? A general biography. Generally, just I'll post a nice resume template for you guys in case you guys want to see one. You can always borrow it. It's your call whether you want to add something like a biography to that, but usually you have to have like a cover letter for a lot of jobs. So I have just all kinds of cover letter templates because that tends to come in handy. Think about your own ambition and what do you want and how do you get it? How do you rise up the ranks if that's what you're interested in? And how do you get yourself to a point where you're constantly developing more skills? Again, I know to be a GM, getting that first GM job was really hard for me. But so I went to like a breakfast and lunch place first. And then there I learned all the kinds of stuff like inventory, labor, food cost, all the spreadsheets, back office stuff, ordering, administration, HR, paperwork, all those things I never had a chance to really do as an executive chef or front of the house manager, for example. And then once I had those skills and I was able to then bank off of that job and get myself an even better job. So again, I was always looking over some chef's shoulder or some person's shoulder to figure out what they're doing and how they're doing it, and then writing down everything they're telling me and taking notes and then typing up those notes. And again, that's how you get ahead. When I want to become a professor, I have so many mentors. I've had all kinds of people look out for me and hook me up with templates and give me basic course shells so I could start working off of those and then teach me how to build it, getting into advising, getting into different committees, whatever it might be. I have had people teach me all the way, and I'm so grateful. So again, for your final exam review, be thinking, this is from the book. This is stuff that we're going to be going over. Most of it we've already covered, so I'm just going to throw it out for you. But again, look over the sections on critical thinking and what it is, transitional issues you might face going into college, integrity with academic honesty and being a good person, being civil, etc. Objective evaluation, check that out from your book. Carl, clarity, accuracy, relevance, and logic related to critical thinking. The critical thinking trap or the problem solving trap. Priority management, what's the difference between that and priorities? look up the types of procrastinators, number of hours studying per week, how much should it take per class, information literacy using good citations and references and solid websites, scholarly articles, things like that. Being a motivated learner and what that entails, environmental factors that affect learning, types of learning styles, types of intelligences, skills for note taking and outlining, out of class strategies that you can apply to maintain that work life balance, the chart on forgetting after 2 hours, 1 week, 4 weeks, etc., and how that functions with memory, mnemonic devices for memorizing, active versus passive reading, SQ4R, and extrinsic versus intrinsic motivation. Y'all, thank you so much, and it's been a pleasure. Have a wonderful day.